In this video, we're looking at practice 21 about rounding decimals. Practice 21 starts on page 46. So let's turn to that page and let's review the rounding rule. If you haven't watched the instructional video, I encourage you to do that. The rounding rule, if you remember that heel with 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, this is the round up side. 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0 is the stay the same side. And remember, we're looking at the neighbor to make this determination. And I'm going to make a copy of this so I can use it as we go. Alright, number 1. Ramona runs 100 meters in 13.549 seconds. What is her time rounded to the nearest tenth? So I don't need the length of the race, I need her time, which is 13.549. The place of reference is the tenths place, it's this one. So I'm going to look at the neighbor and apply the rounding rule. The neighbor in this case is a 4. It's right here. So that's on the stay the same part of the heel. So we're going to keep the 5 just as it is. And with whole numbers, we round off the ends. But with decimals, we don't do that. Those are ghost zeros that we talked about in the instruction video. So 13.5 is the answer. It's to the nearest tenth. Number 2. Gail's cat has a mass of about 4.2 kilograms. Which could be the cat's actual mass before rounding to the nearest tenth? So the 4.2 has already been rounded to the nearest tenth. We need to round our answer choices to the nearest tenth. So I'll look here at the neighbor. The neighbor's a 4, so the number does not change. 4.1. Then let's round this choice to the nearest tenth. The neighbor says to round up this time, so the 1 becomes a 2. This one to the nearest tenth is going to be, neighbor says round up, so this would go to 4.3. And then this one, let me use yellow again, is going to be a round up to 4.3. So the one that matches that 4.2 is this one, B. Number 3. Katie measures her property and determines that her front yard is 32.196 meters long. 32.196 meters long. What is the length of Katie's front yard rounded to the nearest meter? That's to the nearest whole meter. So I look back at my neighbor, and while I have some space, let me bring in the rounding heel just to remind you. The neighbor is a 1, and that is the stay same side of the heel. So we're going to leave our 2 alone, and the rest of that drops away. So to the nearest meter, it is A, 32 meters. Number 4. Ignacio fills his car's fuel tank with about 44 liters of gasoline. About. That's already been rounded. Which could be the exact amount of gasoline Ignacio uses before rounding to the nearest liter? So we want to round all of our choices and see which one of them is going to be 44. So we have to look at these whole number places. This one, neighbor says stay. So that would be 43. This one, neighbor says stay. This one, neighbor says stay. This one, neighbor says round up. So the one that matches the 44 is C. That's the only one that rounds to 44. Number 5. Terrence downloads an app that uses 37 and 638 thousandths megabytes of storage. How many megabytes does the app use rounded to the nearest hundredth? So the reference place is hundredth, and the number that needs to be rounded is this one. The hundredths place is the 3. Look back. Let me pull the heel in here. I have room for it this time. And the neighbor this time is an 8. It's on the round up side of this heel. So we're going to say 37.64 when you round up. And that's going to be option D. Number 6. Dennis correctly rounds one of these numbers to 530. Which number is it? So we're rounding to the nearest whole number. And let's start looking at neighbors. This neighbor says round up. So 525. This neighbor says round up. 525. This neighbor says round up. 535. And this neighbor says round up to 537. And I'm not seeing the answer that I need. They say that the answer is C. $534.97 rounded to the nearest 10. Number 6. Dennis correctly rounds one of these numbers to 530. Which number is it? Well, 530 has been rounded to the nearest 10. So that's the point of reference in all of these. We want to look at the tens place to see which one makes the 530. So in this one, the neighbor says stay the same. So I keep the 5 and the 2 and round the 4 to a 0. This one, neighbor says stay, so we get 520. This one, neighbor says stay, so we get 530. And this one, neighbor says round up, so we get 540. So the answer we want is C. Number 7. Justin plots a point on the number line. And here it is. It's between 8 and 9. So it's more than 8 but less than 9. Which number could the point represent? 8.372, definitely. 8.912, possibly. 9.723, that's going to be over here. And 9.248 would be in here. So it has to be 8.3 or 8.9. And 8.3 is closer to 8, like that point is. The point is less than halfway, so it is below 8.5. It's going to be closer to the 8 than to the 9. I would go with A on this one. I like that question. That is making us use a number line, and it's making us think. Number 8. Susan buys a bag of cashews that weighs 3.45 ounces. What is the weight of the bag rounded to the nearest tenth? Well, we have 3.45, and we're going to round that to the nearest tenth. So I'll look at the neighbor, and it rounds to 3.5 ounces. So I would go with C on this one. Number 9. Mark plans to cover over 1,000 square feet of his home with laminate flooring. Which amount of laminate is enough? So he needs to cover over 1,000 square feet of his home. And the only choice that is over 1,000 is option D. And I'm having trouble with my Apple Pen all of a sudden. There we go. Option D is the one that you want. Number 10. Tammy uses about 24 milliliters of water for a recipe. Which could be the exact amount of water Tammy uses before rounding to the nearest milliliter? So we're going to round all of these to the nearest milliliter and then see which one of them is 24. And the nearest milliliter is the nearest whole number. So if you look at the neighbor on this one, it tells us to stay the same. Neighbor says round up on this one. Neighbor says round up. It's early in the morning, guys. And this one says to round up also. So the one that rounds to 24 is B. Number 11. Nathan has a spot of rust on his car that is 2.74 centimeters in diameter. How many centimeters is the diameter rounded to the nearest centimeter? So that is, this one is already rounded to. Sorry, I'm rounding the wrong thing. I was thinking, why would they give me one that's already rounded? I need to round this number to the nearest whole centimeter. So that will round to 3. And I would go with option D on that one. It is closer to 3 than to the A choice, 2. This is a good one I can show you on a number line. If you look at your choices here, we know it's between 2 and 3, 2.74. Here's the halfway point. That would be 2.5. 2.74 is going to be about right here. So what rounding is telling me is that it is closer to the 3 end than to the 4. To the 2 end of the number line. It is closer to 3 than to 2. And that's really what rounding is. It's just a matter of figuring out the number in question, your reference number, is it closer to one end or the other. But some of them are hard to see on a number line. This is a good one that we can put on there. Okay, number 12. Carla writes a report for about 2 hours. Which could be the exact number of hours Carla writes before rounding to the nearest hour? So they give me 4 choices and they want to know which of those rounds to about 2 hours. So I'll round to that nearest hour. And we've got a 2 on this one, a 3 on this one, a 3 on this one, and a 3 on this one. So the one that is rounding to 2 is A. She could have worked 1.5 hours and say that that rounds up to 2. Number 13. A race is 7 7/77 kilometers long. What is the distance of the race rounded to the nearest tenth? So if you take that number and you mark your tenths place and you look at the neighbor says to round up. So we're looking at 7.8 kilometers, and that is option C. I almost picked option B because sometimes my brain doesn't see things exactly the way it should. So be careful that you get the answer and that you pick the answer you want to pick. Number 14. The tires on Charlotte's bicycle spin at 102 39/100 revolutions per minute. So that means that the tires on her bike turn about how many times per minute? 102 times per minute. How fast are the tires spinning rounded to the nearest whole number? So that's exactly what they're asking us. If you round this number to the nearest whole, you look back there and the neighbor says stay. It's closer to 102 times per minute than 103 times per minute. So C is the answer we want. Revolutions per minute mean turns or rotations per minute. How many times is that bicycle tire making one full turn, one full revolution? Zeke has about $580 in his checking account. Which could be the exact amount of money in Zeke's account before rounding to the nearest $10? So in this one, we don't want the nearest whole dollar. We want the nearest 10, not tenth. It is 10. So let's mark that place and then look at the neighbors. Neighbor says stay. Neighbor says stay. Neighbor says round up. Neighbor says round up. So which one of those matches the amount he has? And that is 580. So that is option C. Brian's electric meter shows that he uses 932 and 733 thousandths of a kilowatt hours in 1 month. What is the number of kilowatt hours rounded to the nearest whole number? So we're going to take his amount that he uses and we're going to round that to the nearest whole number. That's the ones place. So we look back at the neighbor and the neighbor says round up. So this becomes 933, that is C, kilowatt hours. Number 17. According to a conservation commission, commercial crabbers can keep a type of crab only if its width is at least 16.5 centimeters. Crabs less than 16.5 centimeters wide must be released. Which two widths would result in crabs being released? So we know that they're released if they're less than 16.5 centimeters. So this is actually a comparison it's actually a rounding and then a comparison. We know that these two are greater than 16.5, so these two you can keep them. We are looking at anything less than 16.5 and we're looking for two of them. So let's look right here. 16.52 would round to 16.5. You can keep that one. 16.59 would round to 16.6. So you can keep both of those. The two that you could not keep are these two. B is close. It's 1/100th of a centimeter out of the range, but you still have to throw it back. So A and B would be released, and the other 4 crabs you could keep. Number 18. A mountain is 2 16/100 miles in elevation. So what that means, if you have a perfect mountain, which rarely you will, the elevation is this distance. It's the height. So that's 2.16 miles up there. How high is the peak of the mountain rounded to the nearest whole number? So we know that that peak is 2.16 miles, and we round that to the nearest whole number. It is about 2 miles high, closer to 2 than to 3. Number 19. A bottle contains about 500 milliliters of water. Which could be the exact volume of water in the bottle before rounding to the nearest 100? So we're going to highlight our hundreds places, do the rounding, and see which one of those is 500. Neighbor says stay. Neighbor says round up. Neighbor says round up. Neighbor says round up. And only one of those rounds to 500, and that is option B. And finally, Shelley wants to buy about 2 pounds of lunch meat. Which two weights can be rounded to 2 pounds? So we need two answers that round to 2 pounds. So let's take our whole number and let's do some rounding and see what we come up with. Neighbor says stay. Neighbor says stay. Neighbor says round up. Neighbor says stay. Neighbor says round up. And neighbor says round up. We want the two of them that round to 2 pounds. So C and D. And that brings us to the end of practice 21 about rounding decimals. It was a good opportunity to review the rounding rule. In the next lesson, we will begin adding and subtracting decimals, and we're almost finished with this book. It won't be long. So I will see you in the next video. I hope you have a very good day. Bye-bye.